In the summer of 2009, I right-clicked on a dead man's website and hit View Page Source. He was an old guy I knew from the internet. I was 24, and honestly, I was just looking for a way to say goodbye. What I found instead, hidden under the page where no visitor would ever see it, was a wall of dated postings offering serious money for men who could shoot, travel overseas on short notice, and keep their mouths shut. The old man was dead, but his board was still hiring. I'm in my 40s now, and I've told this story badly at enough parties to know where it has to start. His name, as far as any of us knew, was Milo, a 79-year-old veteran who spent his last years telling war stories on a young website called Reddit and who died in July of 2009. Within days of his death, the people who mourned him found a hidden message board buried in the code of his image site, filled with years of job postings for shooters and escorts and security men, written in the flat, professional voice of people who had done such work before. 6 months later, a man was assassinated in a Dubai hotel room by a team of 26 operatives, and a corner of the internet became convinced the two stories were one story. So the question comes in two sizes. Who was Milo, and what exactly was his website for? To understand how strange this got, it helps to remember what the internet was in 2009. Reddit was small then, a plain white page of blue links where the same few thousand people talked every day, and the regulars became characters you knew the way you know coworkers. And no character was more familiar than a gruff old poster who told us he was 79, that he'd landed in Normandy as a teenager in 1944, and that he'd stayed in uniform, one way or another, until 1987. He was foul-mouthed and funny and weirdly patient with kids like me, and if his service dates didn't quite add up when you ran the math, and they didn't, nobody pressed him because you don't fact-check your grandpa. He was just an old man on the internet. But if you read him closely, and I did, the old man knew things retirees don't usually know. He talked about weapons and body armor with a supplier's fluency, about overseas security contracting like a man reading from memory, about how convoys are guarded and buildings are cleared. And this was 2009, the height of the private contractor era, when firms like Blackwater were in the headlines every week, and thousands of former soldiers were working wars for private money. Milo posted about that world the way a plumber posts about pipes. No drama, just shop talk. And in damn near every thread, he found a way to link the same website, his website. The website was called LakeCityQuietPills.com, and let's be adults about what it was. A crude, one-page adult image host, the kind the early web had thousands of, billing itself as a place to stash your ammo. We took the name as a joke, and the tagline as a wink, because that was exactly the old man's sense of humor, and none of us ever thought to look deeper. It took a death to make us look. On July 17, 2009, a brand new account posted to Reddit under a name none of us had ever seen. The user called himself 26 and announced that Milo had died at 79. The post read less like grief and more like a report. It said the old man had spent his working life at the Lake City Arsenal, a United States Army ammunition plant in Missouri, and it closed out his affairs in a few flat sentences the way a soldier files paperwork. We grieved him the way the internet grieves, a thread full of stories, upvoted, and it took days for anyone to say the strange part out loud. The obituary had come from a total stranger whose username was a military call sign. And on the same day, in a place none of us knew existed yet, somebody posted a second goodbye. It surfaced later when we found the hidden board, dated July 17, an anonymous note to whoever else read that place, saying that old Milo had died the day before. He went quietly and calm, not like we all figured. And then the writer added one more line. He had given the old man's fat, mangy cat to the little girl next door. Whoever these people were, whatever their board was for, one of them had stood in Milo's house, wrapped up his life, and found a home for his cat. In the days after he died, mourners did the only pilgrimage the internet offers. They visited his website, and one of them, nobody remembers who was first, looked behind it. Every web page is two documents. The picture it shows the world, and the code underneath that builds the picture, and any browser will show you the second one in a click. I'd done it 1,000 times as a web guy, usually to steal somebody's layout tricks. On Milo's site, between the lines of ordinary code, there was a wall of hidden text that rendered invisibly, that no casual visitor would ever see, that existed only for people who already knew to look. I was one of the people reading it that first night, and it was like lifting a floorboard in a dead friend's house and finding a second house underneath. It was a job board. Dated postings, going back years, written in flat professional shorthand, security and escort work, protection details, requests for experienced shooters, notes about client payments and schedules and dead drops, destinations overseas, rates that were high and terms that assumed the reader owned his own equipment. There was no menace in the writing, and that was the unnerving part. It read like logistics, like men arranging shifts, because whoever wrote it did not consider any of it remarkable. We stopped saying just about the old man that night. And the work it described was real work, in real places. Escort details through cities you only saw in the news, protection contracts measured in weeks, travel on short notice with your own kit, the quiet economy of the contractor era, where a man with the right resume could take a posting on a Tuesday and be standing next to an SUV in body armor by Friday. The board didn't read like fantasy because it wasn't fantasy. It read like a trade with its own classifieds. Then somebody checked the archives. The Wayback Machine keeps snapshots of the web going back decades, and when we pulled the old captures of Milo's site, the hidden postings were there too, year after year of them, running quietly under that page since before most of us had ever heard of Reddit. It had operated in plain darkness for years. That blue light in the old man's den window had been burning over it the whole time, and it surfaced for exactly one reason. The one man whose job was to keep it dark had died, and whoever inherited the keys had a funeral to run before anyone thought to check the locks. While half of us read postings, the other half worked on the name, and the name turned out to be the confession. The Lake City Army Ammunition Plant sits outside Independence, Missouri, one of the largest producers of military small arms ammunition on Earth, the place the obituary said Milo had worked his whole life, and among shooters, cartridges from that plant are just called Lake City. As for quiet pills, veterans in the threads recognized it at once. Old service slang, a pill that makes a man quiet, a dark joke for a bullet. Read together the way a soldier would read it. The site's name wasn't whimsy at all. Lake City Quiet Pills means Lake City Ammunition means bullets, and the tagline about stashing your ammo stopped being a wink. Which brought everyone back to the stranger who had announced the death. In military radio talk, 26 is not a name, it's a seat, the kind of call sign that designates a unit's leader, the man in charge of the net. And accounts signing with that number turned up elsewhere too, in the cluster of sites Milo's page had grown out of, posting in the same flat voice. The theory that formed was simple and cold. The old man had been the board's keeper, and 26 was the rank that survived him, because the obituary hadn't come from a friend. It had come from the chain of command. Because the board did not die with him. In January of 2010, 6 months after the old man's death, accounts connected to the site, one signing as a 26, posted about an upcoming gathering. A party at a Marriott on a 46th Street with an instruction that stopped every one of us cold. The phones at that location were not to be considered secure. Ordinary men planning an ordinary party do not warn each other about telephone security. We read those posts live, and we made nervous jokes about them, because that's what forums do with things they can't process. And 9 days later, the news broke out of the Persian Gulf. On January 19, 2010, a Hamas commander named Mahmoud al-Mabou flew into Dubai alone under a false name, with his bodyguards not due until the following day. He did not know that a network of men and women, roughly 24 of them traveling on fraudulent passports from half the countries of Europe, had arrived ahead of him and were already coordinating in his hotel. What happened over the next several hours was captured, almost minute by minute, on the hotel's own security cameras, and it became one of the most closely studied assassinations of the modern era. The cameras caught men in tennis outfits trailing him through the lobby, and watchers rotating shifts in his corridor all afternoon. And in the hotel's electronic records, there was something better than film: the memory of his own door lock. That afternoon, while al-Mabou was out of the hotel, the lock recorded one failed attempt to open his door, and then one successful one, which investigators took to mean a duplicate keycard had been programmed. When he returned that evening, the door opened normally, and he walked into a room where men were already waiting. Roughly 20 minutes later, the same men filed out, and by then the commander was dead, drugged and suffocated, staged to look at first like a man who had died in his sleep. Within 4 hours of the killing, nearly all of them were out of the country, scattering on flights to Frankfurt, Bangkok, Zurich, Rome, Johannesburg, Paris, and Doha. Dubai police reconstructed the operation from the footage, publicly attributed it to a state intelligence service, and released the photographs and aliases of the suspects to Interpol. There were 26 of them. And on the other side of the world, on the hidden American message board kept by a dead ammunition man, the obituaries and the party invitations were signed by a user called 26. The dates were laid side by side within days. The gathering on the board and the arrival in Dubai sat close enough on the calendar to make the room go quiet. By one reading, the posted start of the party fell within about half an hour of al-Mabou's plane touching down, and the count of Interpol suspects matched the call sign's number exactly. For a lot of people, that was the whole case, closed. But laid out in daylight, the case refuses to close in either direction. Because here's what the connection is actually made of when you lay it on a table in daylight. Timing and a number. No name from the board ever matched a Dubai suspect. No posting ever mentioned the Gulf. No investigator on the assassination ever publicly linked the site. And the operation itself was attributed to a national intelligence service, an organization with no earthly need to recruit gunmen through the source code of an American image host. The sober theories fit the same facts: a circle of aging veterans running an off-the-books security and bodyguard market, dressed in the slang of their old trade, or, as some insisted, an elaborate alternate reality game that never claimed its audience. And against all of that sits the residue. The theories never quite dissolve. Years of real postings, a real ammunition plant, a real chain of command that outlived its keeper, and a real cat handed over a real fence to a real little girl. Games don't usually feed the cat. The board outlived Milo by 4 years. Then, around 2013, LakeCityQuietPills.com simply stopped resolving. No farewell, no final posting, no explanation. And in the same stretch of time, the accounts that had orbited it, including the 26 names, were deleted or went silent for good. Whoever they were, they had watched the internet, watching them for 4 years, and then they turned off the light. The mystery of Lake City Quiet Pills was never solved. It was withdrawn. What survives, survives in the archives. The snapshots are still there, the crude front page, the wall of hidden shorthand, the goodbye with the cat, frozen the way the Wayback Machine froze them, readable by anyone who knows where the floorboard is. Everything else is gone. The man, the board, the accounts, and any chance of an answer that doesn't begin with the word probably. Here is where the case stands. No one connected to the board has ever been identified. Not Milo, not 26, not one author of one posting, and no agency has ever acknowledged the site's existence. The internet has rooms under its rooms, kept by people who never expect a visitor, and this one was visited exactly once by accident through a dead man's front door. And the record holds two facts that refuse to sit together: a market that dealt in men who shoot, and a member who made sure a fat, mangy cat did not go hungry the week its owner died. Any account of this mystery that drops either fact is not telling the whole story. The only verdict the evidence supports is this: he was never just an old man on the internet. And after him, it's fair to wonder if anyone is.